I have heard many stories of infidelity, and some of them are truly heartbreaking. It was sad to hear about them. My story is, of course, sad, but perhaps it provides another perspective that is worth listening to. I'm not sure why I'm writing about events that happened so many years ago, but maybe it's just a way to show people that good things happen over time. And indeed, time and patience seem to heal almost everything. I met my wife, and we were together for almost 10 years, including 7 years of marriage. We have 2 children who are now adults and have their own lives. My wife and I met on a blind date, and the whole evening was awkward. My wife is an attractive woman with a lively personality. I, on the other hand, am quite reserved and can hardly be considered a person who attracts everyone's attention. I'm not too bad to look at, but I don't in any way claim to be a great heart winner. I also tend to be quiet, and my wife was always the one to be noticed at a party or event. She also has a kind heart and is very sympathetic to people, always looking for the good in them. Strangely, she seemed to like me, and our relationship progressed. Finally, we got married and started building our lives together. Our life was going very well indeed. We had a nice home, good finances, supportive families, good friends, and our kids were fine. But, as with many such stories, there is a catalyst that could change everything. Our catalyst was pregnancy. We had 2 small children at that time, and we wanted to have a 3rd child to make our family even bigger and happier. We never had any problems in the bedroom and were quickly expecting the 3rd. I was thrilled when my wife told me the news, and we waited about 3 months before telling the rest of our family about the new addition. Over the next 3 months, we were busy planning the nursery, getting our kids ready for the new baby, looking at finances, etc. This is perhaps the saddest day of my life when my wife called me to say, "There is something wrong with the baby." We took her to the hospital and, unfortunately, tragically, my wife lost the baby when she was 6 months pregnant. We were both traumatized, and the drive home the next day was filled with silence and sadness. My wife went to bed that night and did not leave that room for the next 3 days. She was absolutely overcome with sadness and depression. For some reason, she also felt that she had failed me as my wife. I told her over and over that it was God's will. She had done nothing wrong, and we could try again when the time was right. But she didn't believe me and continued to blame herself for the whole situation and went into depression. About 6 months passed, but she seemed to be emerging from her despondency and beginning to return to her normal self. We both got along well with children. She regained her characteristic liveliness, and we began to talk about the future. She also started exercising and getting back in shape. She really looked incredible, and I loved complimenting her and telling her how much I loved her. During this time, she also started talking to me about getting a part-time job. It wasn't so much about the money as it was a way to get out of the house and stay involved in life. I told her it was a great idea and encouraged her to think about what she would like to do and take action. To my surprise, she got a job as a waitress and bartender in a restaurant on our street. She had a business degree, but didn't want a white-collar job. She felt the work hours and responsibilities would be too taxing on our home and family, but it would allow her to get up and move. She could make some money for herself, the hours were good, and she felt like she was making a contribution. In addition, she said that she needed to work and interact with adults, and she felt that this would help her get out of isolation at home. Again, I told her this was great news and she should go for it. Now, I previously noted that my wife is an attractive woman, but I should also add that she is a curvy woman and looked really great with her fitness level and weight loss. She never had a problem attracting the attention of men, but she was always faithful to me, and I never had any reason to doubt her. She started working and worked well. She worked 2 or 3 evenings a week, and usually on Friday or Saturday. I felt a little bad about her work clothes because she wore clothes that showed off her figure and showed more than I wanted to see. It was tasteful, but I admit I wish she had been more conservative. She laughed at me about it and said it was a great way to attract more tips, and maybe her outfits could encourage more romantic interest on my part. The owner of the restaurant was a good man and ran a good business. He was fair to his employees, and everyone in his family worked there too. His son was, to be honest, a pretty arrogant jerk. He was born into wealth and made no secret of the fact that he lived a good life. He was about the same age as my wife, and I must admit he was a very handsome guy. He was married, but had no children yet. His wife is a wonderful person. She also worked in a restaurant and kept books. My son handled all the catering and special events. At least he should have been doing this. From what I understand, he was quite lazy and constantly passed on his responsibilities to his family and colleagues. What he really liked to do was lift weights, play sports, ride around in his fancy car, live off his family, and basically talk and brag about how great he was with women. I'm not sure how his wife dealt with all this. He certainly had a bright personality, but the guy didn't make an impression on me. I could tell from the first time I met him that he was nothing more than a big windbag. My wife told me several times that the guy was very handsome in a breathtaking way, but he was an arrogant scoundrel and she couldn't stand him. But she had to work with him and keep her opinions to herself in order to get along. She did work with him on a regular basis, and something of a friendship began to form between them. I wasn't too concerned, but I told her that this guy was a total nuisance, and she should be careful around him since I thought he was nothing more than a nuisance. Over the next few months, my wife really started acting strange. She kept a close eye on her phone, claimed to have to work late, and began to be away from home for long periods of time, claiming to be shopping or running errands. She also began to ignore me to some extent, and it seemed to me that she was not paying as much attention to the children as before. My wife is a good mother, but at the time she seemed impatient with the whole family and didn't mind putting more responsibilities on me. This was difficult, because I also worked full-time and was the main breadwinner for the family. I expressed my concerns to her, but she told me that everything was going well, and I was seeing problems where there were none. One evening, when we were alone and it was quite late, I tried to get closer to her, and she rejected me outright. I asked her what the problem was, and she started crying and shaking. I asked her again what was the matter, and then I got the shock of my life. My wife said that she has been dating the owner's son for about 6 months. The relationship has become sexual. She loves him. Our marriage is over, and she is going to leave me to move in with him. She also told me that she was deeply unhappy after the miscarriage and felt that something in our marriage had died. She needed a fresh start, and she needed to be free to live her life. She also told me that she loves this guy and he can make her happy. I was obviously very shocked and asked her to reconsider her decision. She told me it was too late for that and would be moving in with her new boyfriend in the apartment they had already found. I asked her about the children, and she told me that it would be best if they stayed with me in the house to keep a good home, and she would come and see them. To say that I was absolutely shocked by what happened is an understatement. My wife told me she didn't understand my surprise because she thought I was well aware of her unhappiness in our marriage, and the miscarriage was the last straw. I was not happy when I found out who she entered into a relationship with. It's one thing to be completely betrayed by your wife, but it's another thing entirely to find out that she's leaving you for a guy who was actually a jerk. I don't want to make generalizations, but it seems like there is some truth to the fact that a lot of women are attracted to guys like this. I'm not sure if it was his looks, his ostentatious life, his chatter, or maybe something else I didn't want to think about. But she apparently showed interest in him, and the relationship began. I was very hurt when I found out later that it was my wife who made the first move and started this whole affair. I was also shocked to learn that she had been involved in this for almost 6 months, without my knowledge. It turns out they had sex in his car, in a restaurant, in hotels, at his house, in our house when no one was there. It was a real betrayal, and I was deeply hurt. But I thought about what I would do and maintained my perspective and composure. Over the next few weeks, there were a lot of tears, sadness, pleading, and just a lot of things. Being the crazy engineer that I am, I spent an entire weekend creating a matrix and diagram of my various options and the consequences of each. I then put together a numerical score of my options to figure out which course of action I thought was best. It was absolutely insane and devoid of any normal human reaction. Strangely, thinking rationally and having a plan has really shown me what I see as the best plan for the future. My family, and especially my father, were furious and started saying terrible things about her. My wife's family was also upset about the situation, but apparently did not display the same level of anger and bitterness as mine. Her parents were kind to me, but they did everything they could to support and help their daughter, as I understood. But I did have to intervene and ask my father to stop throwing venomous insults at my wife. She was still the mother of his son's children, and he had to show her respect as a grandfather. My father actually agreed and appreciated my approach to this situation. I told him that I didn't see any benefit to myself in taking revenge on my soon-to-be ex-wife. She was the mother of my children, and I needed to maintain a communicative relationship with her for the sake of our children. Do not misunderstand me. I would love to become a scoundrel, but I thought about it carefully. I think I made the right choice, and in retrospect, I would have done the same thing. Like I said, it was a rough couple of weeks, but she actually moved out and moved into this guy's apartment. She saw her children and tried to be active in their lives. I also felt terribly sorry for the guy's wife, and she was very shaken by what happened. She left the restaurant to find another job and filed for divorce. I would see her occasionally at the local grocery store and always wished her well. She was originally from Pennsylvania and eventually returned home. As far as I know, she remarried a decent man and now has a good life and children. I wish her nothing but the best. There is no doubt that her breakup with this guy is the best thing that could have happened to her. I only lost my temper once, and that was because of that stupid phone she had. My wife never saw me really upset. I remained calm, and she didn't see the incident either. We had a flip phone. They were very new at the time and cost a fortune. We paid for this stupid phone, and at the time I didn't even know how to use it. She told me it was for safety and protection, but she really wanted it, so she could talk to her new boyfriend. I heard it ring once when she first told me she wanted to leave, and I threw it on the floor when she left the room. The damn thing practically broke, and I threw it away. I denied knowing where he was. My wife searched for this stupid thing for 2 days, and then decided she had lost it. The divorce itself went smoothly. She did receive some money from me due to the division of assets. I also agreed to pay child support for a short period of time, which I believe ended in a year or maybe 15 months. For me, it was a cheap way to get out of the situation. In fact, I would probably agree to whatever financial demands she made just to end this situation. I remained the children's primary caregiver, and she had 50-50 visitation rights. I told her that she could always come in and see the children. She did this numerous times, and things seemed to be going relatively smoothly. I also think she liked to see me when she came to visit the children, but perhaps that was just my empty hope. My wife didn't make much money, but she made a small monthly payment to support the children. To her credit, she tried her best and never missed a payment when it came to the children. In retrospect, there is no doubt in my mind that my wife was going through some kind of personal crisis after the miscarriage and its aftermath. I'm not some great prize, but it's impossible to imagine that my wife in her right mind would have done what she did. But I was powerless, and there was not much I could do. The day we signed the divorce papers to make it final was surreal. Everything looked fine, but it was still hard. We met at her lawyer's office, and it was a sad occasion for me. It upset me that she seemed so happy about it, and she was there with her asshole boyfriend. She almost seemed excited about it, which really shocked me. We were together for many years and started a family together. This was the only time I felt like she didn't respect me during the entire divorce process, but I let it slide because there was nothing left to prove. The marriage was over and we needed to move on. When I signed the papers, I actually saw some regret in her eyes. I think she was shocked because I remember what I told her. I thought about it and already decided what I would say. I have to admit I'm proud of what I said and how good it sounded. I'm not an actor, but that day I had dramatic talent. I wrote it down and practiced it until I remembered it, and this is what I said. Of course, I'm sad about it. I thought we had a good life and were a good team. First, I need to apologize to you if you think I let you down. I couldn't bring you the happiness you wanted. I must have really let you down if you thought someone else would give you a better chance at happiness than I could. I think I did my best, but it clearly wasn't enough. I think the miscarriage had a lot more to do with this than we realize. When tragedies occur, people either become closer and stronger, or there is separation and loss. I find it sad and ironic that what should have been a happy experience for us, I believe, destroyed us in the end. But that is now in the past. I want you to be happy so we can work together to give our children the best and most stable life we can. The room froze when I said this. Her face went white, and I think I actually saw regret in her eyes. Afterwards, I stood up, shook her hand, wished her well, said goodbye, and her lawyer told me he would send me a copy of the papers. Everything went fine at first. She lived with this guy, but after a few months, cracks began to appear in their relationship. It turned out that he drank too much, was quite a slacker, lived off his family, and wasn't really a real man. He also seemed to have an inclined eye and had already begun to look for his next victim. It appeared to be a young girl who worked at another restaurant owned by his father. It's interesting, and perhaps a little strange, that I continued to order food from their establishment. The owner always greeted me when I came in to order and always looked at me with greeting and friendliness. The food was great, and I always liked their pizza and lasagna. There was no way I could give it up, and I drew a line in the sand when it came to a good takeout meal. I knew the owner for many years and always waved to him when I drove past his house. I also saw him at the grocery store, around town, at school and sporting events because he came to watch his grandchildren. I didn't stay in the restaurant. I just called, placed an order, and went to the pickup window. I have never stayed at an establishment because it would have been awkward. My ex-wife worked there and lived with his son. If we add to this that he abandoned his wife, the owner was unhappy. He was a family man, and once told me that he didn't understand where he had gone wrong with his son. Of course, and unsurprisingly, things started to go downhill with this new, exciting power couple. My ex-wife called them that way once, and I admit it really irritated me. The power couple was now constantly fighting, and things were not going well for my ex-wife. I think my ex-wife started to see that maybe I wasn't such a bad option, and the grass wasn't always greener on the other side. With me, she had a reliable man who put her and the children first. I was a good husband, and maybe she made a really bad choice. She called me several times to complain about her life, but I told her that I was not the person she should discuss this with. She replied that I was her best friend, and she could always talk to me about anything. I told her that it was true, but things had changed, and I didn't feel comfortable being a part of that conversation, and she needed to figure it out herself with her new partner. I didn't want to be involved in her relationship and wasn't interested in her relationship with her new boyfriend. She agreed, but I think I could sense some pain and regret in her voice when she hung up after I told her that. One night, she invited the kids over to her apartment with her douchebag boyfriend for a sleepover and to watch movies. That evening, I received an excited call from her. Apparently, this guy drank too much and got angry because the kids didn't want to watch one of his shows. I'm not sure what kind of show it was, but the kids clearly weren't interested. So he got angry and hit my youngest daughter because he thought she was being cocky. It was a strong blow and left a mark on her cheek. So I got the call and went there immediately. My first thought was to call the police, and maybe that's what I should have done. But I went there to pick up my children. You shouldn't laugh, but what I did to him still makes me smile. The guy was very handsome and in good shape. However, it was not large in size by anyone's standards. It should be noted that I am a large and strong man with years of military experience and know how to take care of myself. So I grabbed his neck with my left hand and grabbed his right hand. Then I started beating him pretty well with my own hand, while at the same time telling him, "Hey, why are you hitting yourself?" My older brother did this to me when I was a kid. I saw this once in the army, and that's where I got the idea from. I think this was an appropriate way to handle the situation. It was very humiliating for him. Then I took my children and left. I told him that if I heard anything more from him about this, my next call would be to the police, and then he would be in real trouble. This was the last thing I wanted, as it would also cause problems for my ex-wife, and she was really unable to handle more trouble. I admit that I took some pleasure in chastising my ex-wife with a very snarky comment, "And this is why you left me?" She didn't say anything, but lowered her head. I think she was ashamed of what happened. I'm not sure if this meant she regretted the divorce, but I think she realized what she had done and was full of regrets. So later that night, there was a knock on my door, and it was her, in tears and very upset. I let her inside, and she told me that she had broken up with her boyfriend and wanted to come home. I thought long and hard for a few minutes and told her I loved her. We had a past, but I couldn't be a backup option since her relationship didn't work out and I couldn't go back to that. Considering everything that had happened, I didn't think it was a good idea for her to come back, and there were too many sad memories. However, I would never leave the mother of my children on the street alone. She went in and called her parents. I took her to them. My ex-father-in-law met me at the door and thanked me. He told me that I have always been a good person and a good husband. He appreciated that I put the children first and cared about his daughter's safety as my ex-wife. I told him that I would always love his daughter. Things may not have worked out the way we wanted, but I won't let anything endanger her. To this day, I am proud of what I did that night and how I chose to protect my children and, ultimately, my ex-wife. She lived in her parents' house for about a year until she was able to get back on her feet. She actually found a good job with my help and contacts and moved into her own place. She had always been a good mother, and her old vivacity and spark had returned. It wasn't perfect, but there was a sense of normalcy. She has been in a number of relationships that went nowhere and appears to have been taken advantage of several times. For some reason, she had a penchant for guys who looked good but were scoundrels. I never understood the appeal of bad boys, and my ex-wife was a living example of why these guys seem like losers. She always seemed busy lending them money, being part of a love triangle, and generally dealing with a lot of bad situations. Several times she told me that I was the best relationship she had ever had, and no one else could compare. It might have been a lot of empty talk, but I liked hearing it. I upset her one day when she told me that I was her greatest relationship, and she made the mistake of ruining it. I think she was trying to be sincere. She was seriously pissed off when I told her that maybe if I had been more of a jerk and treated her badly sometimes, she wouldn't have run off with another man because she seemed to enjoy being someone's supporter and comforter. She didn't speak to me for almost a month after that, but I admit that I enjoyed it and appreciated the impact it had on her. A month later, we started talking again, and she laughed about it and told me that, unfortunately, what I said was true. Despite everything, nothing more romantic happened between us, and I maintained a polite and respectful relationship with her. I believe that I could be with her again if I wanted, but I would not take this step, even though she gave hints and offers. Deep down, I wanted this, but I was afraid of getting hurt again. I've dated some women, and I don't claim to have lived like a monk after my divorce. Everything was fine for me, but I was busy with work and children. At that time, most single women my age were also divorced and had their own family dramas. I had several encounter experiences during this time that I think justified my approach. I didn't want to invite women home unless I was serious about the person. I dated some really nice and attractive women, but I didn't want to take it to the next level. Some of them wanted more from me, but I wasn't going to do it. I was focused on work, kids, and really wasn't interested in another marriage or long-term relationship. Maybe I was selfish, but I just didn't want to deal with it, so I never got too serious, even when I had the opportunity. Some of them accused me of playing with them and leading them by the nose, but I was always honest with them. I would also be a liar if I said that my past feelings for my ex-wife had no influence. I just didn't want to take the next step to something more serious. I felt like I had already been through this and been deceived, so why do it again? Now everything is so different. How I wished back then I could go to a dating site, post a photo of myself, and scroll through in search of an interested person. It was a different time. Maybe not better, but the relationship was different. The main thing for me was that there were too many bad memories, and I decided that the best thing for me was to remain alone. However, what gave me pleasure was that my ex-wife regularly asked the children for information if she thought I was seeing someone. They really couldn't tell her anything since I didn't bring any women home for the above reasons. She got upset and asked me about the relationship several times. I would change the subject, much to her dismay, and end the discussion with a giggle and the comment, "I feel great romantically and have no problems or complaints in my love life." I may have been petty, but that state of affairs gave me pleasure for several days afterwards. It is worth noting that one of the most significant events for us occurred when I was called back to active duty to participate in Iraq. I, of course, was not happy with the summons, since I believed that I had already given my time to active service and spent another 18 years in the reserves. I thought my time in service was over, but I made a commitment and had to fulfill my responsibilities. My ex-wife was very scared for me at the time. She had also been called to active duty during the first Gulf War and knew well what I would be up against. She tried to talk to me about our past relationship before I left and the possibility of getting back together, but I just couldn't deal with that kind of drama at the time. I told her I was glad she was here. She was back to normal, and I knew she would take good care of the kids with the help of both sets of families. During my business trip, my ex-wife probably wrote me a dozen letters and sent me several packages. At that time, I couldn't do drama and had to keep my mind clear. There was also a group photo of my unit in a news magazine, and I was in the photo too. It was a hard life, and in the photo I did not look like an epitome of cleanliness and health. This photo seemed to really touch her when she saw it, and she was very afraid for me. Obviously, it was a difficult time for me too, but I simply didn't have the time or inclination to deal with issues that would distract me. As a result, and perhaps as a sign of petty revenge, I never opened or read a single letter from her. I threw all her letters and packages in the trash and kept thoughts of her out of my head. I wrote to my children regularly, and they wrote to me. Several of their letters talked about how my ex-wife suffered because of my lack of response, but I did not want to let this drama into my life. As a result, I never answered her. When I returned home 10 months later, I saw my ex-wife at a family event to celebrate my return. I was unhappy that my parents invited her, but I took it for granted. The fact is that my love for her never died, and seeing her always hurt me. But I just couldn't get over what happened earlier, and I ended up just being afraid. So she told me that she was very hurt and surprised that I never wrote back to her, or at least sent her a note thanking her for the cookies and cake she sent me. I told her straight out that I never read anything she sent me and threw the packages away without opening them. I told her we broke up years ago. I didn't ask her to text me. The whole situation was still sad and painful to me, and I didn't want to have any drama with her in my life. She knew we needed to work together for our children. I would be nice to her, help her with the kids, make sure she was protected. But I lied when I told her I wasn't interested in a relationship with her. I noted earlier that she looked regretful when I signed the divorce papers, but I think what I told her that day really hit her. She later told me that this moment really shook her. Her ex-husband was sent to a very difficult place, and he literally didn't want to hear anything from her and couldn't be bothered to even look at what she sent. She told me that it really shocked her, was deeply hurtful, and made her think about the long-term consequences of what happened. Looking back, I am very ashamed of how I handled this situation. I responded to everyone who sent me something, but I couldn't respond to my ex-wife. It's not one of my best moments, and I'm not proud of how I treated her. The truth that I didn't tell her is that I didn't respond because I still loved her and was afraid because of what happened earlier. However, we had a very good relationship. Things are never perfect, and we are not perfect people. We worked together to raise our children, and we were a very good team when it came to our children. She was in the house so often to see the kids that I almost felt like I could tell her to move back. I think if I suggested this, she would immediately agree. As my daughters grew older, she was an integral part of their lives. I tried my best, but I think a mother can handle some situations better than a father. She helped my daughters with breaking up with boyfriends, falling in love, and more. My ex-wife handled these issues masterfully. She was always there for them. My respect for her grew as I saw how adept she was at helping children make good decisions. One of my daughters once dated someone who I considered a typical scoundrel. I'm not sure what happened, but my wife talked to her. She seemed to be telling my daughter about her own choices and their consequences. The good news is that the bad guy was quickly thrown out, and I breathed a sigh of relief. The years flew by. My children went to college, built careers, got married, and started families. I still saw my ex-wife at family events regularly. She always asked me if I was seeing anyone, and always came back with hints about whether there was a chance for us to get back together. I always told her no, because there are things in life that stay and you can't get away from them. She always looked sad and told me that deciding to leave me was the worst decision and mistake of her life. She told me that not a day goes by that she doesn't think about the what-ifs. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have similar feelings, but I was too afraid to tell her or give her a chance to see what would happen. She also told me that she found it especially difficult at events, such as weddings, birthdays, and other family events. She told me that the hardest days for her from this point of view were the funerals of her mother and father when they died. She was happy to see me there, but she was very sad because I was not there as her husband and partner to support her at such a difficult time in her life. She knew that I was a strong man and a good husband for her. But these days she felt lonely and had a lot of regret. She also felt it at both of our children's weddings and at the birth of our grandchildren. She thought these were great days that we were going to share together. She asked me if I had ever felt the same way. My answer has always been that divorce was a sad experience for me, but I decided to move forward and not look back. I told her that I thought her regret was ironic, given how sure she was that true happiness was with her new boyfriend. She never liked to hear it and would get upset if I mentioned it. I recently had an experience with a work colleague. I was surprised to learn that my situation was not as uncommon as I thought. A guy I worked with had a similar experience, but he was the one who cheated. This was due to the death of his son in a car accident. He couldn't cope with it. Part of him died along with his son. He couldn't get over it and started blaming his wife. I couldn't understand it, but somehow he transferred his grief onto his wife. He then became drawn into the idea that something was missing in his life and began an affair with another woman. I couldn't understand it either. He left his wife of more than 20 years for a woman he met one day on a business trip. He also made bad choices. He got divorced, got married, and got divorced again in less than 5 years. I had lunch with him one day and was shocked when he told me that he was dating his first ex-wife again, and things were going great for them. One thing I understood for sure: some people take tragic situations very hard. Instead of facing it, they try to block it out, thinking they can hide from it. I believe this happened to my ex-wife. I admit that this situation has really made me stop and think seriously about my life and my relationship with my ex-wife. Now we're almost 60. I've been thinking about retiring and moving somewhere warm, at least for the colder months. My children support me and love their mother. The last time I spoke to my ex-wife before moving was at the birthday party of one of our grandchildren. She asked to speak to me alone, and we went outside. She then became very emotional and upset. She always thought there was a chance for us to get back together. Me moving would mean the absolute end, and her going through a life of regret for failing as a wife. I told her that so many years had passed and she shouldn't feel that way. I have nothing but respect and admiration for her. I told her that she had been through some tough times but had truly gotten her life back together. She was a wonderful mother, had a great career, and was a friend to many people, including me. She shouldn't have been pining over one issue that happened so many years ago. I let go of this a long time ago and invited her to do the same. She then continued to cry and asked if I really thought it was possible to let go of such a huge mistake. She was very sorry for her betrayal of me and the impact on our family. She told me that she still doesn't understand why she did what she did and thinks about it all the time. She didn't recognize the woman she had been so many years ago. She then calmed down, took my hands, looked me in the eyes, and asked if she could potentially come visit me. I told her I don't know, but I'll think about it. I admit that every time I looked into her beautiful green eyes, my heart melted. Today was no exception. She looked especially beautiful to me that day, and the years have been very kind to her. On this day, I must admit that no matter what happened previously, I have never felt more intense love for her than at this moment. It may not make sense, but the heart feels what it feels. Then she kissed me for the first time in almost 30 years, and I would be lying if I didn't admit that at that moment, I wanted her back in my life more than anything else. I somehow managed to maintain my calm. I told her that I needed to think about the whole situation and what I needed to do. The whole conversation and situation played in my head over and over again. At this point in my life, I thought that maybe I would be happy to be in a relationship with her. I wouldn't marry again, but what did I really have to lose at this stage? She once made me happy, and my love for her never faded. At this point in our lives, perhaps we could move forward. So, I now live in the Carolinas, and my ex-wife came to visit me after I told her I wanted her to come see me. Crazy, I know, but all the old feelings are still here. She stayed with me, and we spent a lot of time together. I'm happy to say that we may be older, but have learned that we still get along well together in what I call our special time. She was here for a weekend, but that turned into 2 weeks, and then a month. One evening, as her time to return home drew near, she began to cry and sob over something that happened literally years ago. She told me that the last few weeks have brought her great happiness, and she is so sorry for what happened. She told me that she constantly thinks about the what-ifs and whether she has spent her life chasing some utopian relationship that cannot exist. I told her it was in the past, and maybe it was time to move on and consider a future together. I told her that I always loved her, my feelings for her never faded, and maybe she would like to be with me permanently. She had a look of shock on her face when I said this. She took my hands and asked if I was really serious or if it was just an impulsive decision. I told her it was a spontaneous decision, but I've thought about it for a long time and I'm serious. I told her that if she stayed, I would never let her out of my life again. I told her I wasn't sure about remarriage, but did it really matter at this point in our lives? She agreed, never actually left my house, and things are going great for us. The kids were absolutely shocked when we told them, but they were also very happy for us. My youngest daughter told me that she wasn't really surprised because she knew that my love for her mother had never faded, and she had a feeling that things weren't over yet. At the moment, everything is going very well, and we have no complaints. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but we get along well as a couple and are very happy. The biggest problem we face is that my wife continues to lament the choices she made over 30 years ago. I told her that the past is in the past for now, and I really don't want to relive what happened. We had a great family, we had some problems, but now everything is going well. She still feels like she has to continue to prove her loyalty to me, and I told her that it doesn't matter anymore. She knows about my love for her. She needs to forget the past and look to the future. She also wants to show me that she has absolute transparency. I told her I was not interested in checking her phone, social media, etc. I trust her and will not hold a situation that happened 30 years ago against her. She understands, but for some reason she still feels like she has to prove herself. It's not a big problem, but it still comes up from time to time. However, this situation also improves over time, and she feels more confident in our relationship. We ended up getting married in the chapel with our family witnessing the ceremony. At this stage, we did not see the point in legal marriage, but it was important to both of us that our renewed relationship be blessed by God. This may be an outdated sentiment, but one that I think is important. I thought a lot that day about our vows so many years ago. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Perhaps we were always meant to be together, and this was just a renewal of what was always meant to be. But it's worth noting that the punching incident during movie night is probably the only thing that really upsets my wife, if I mention it. We can discuss other things rationally, but this incident makes her very upset and almost hysterical. Decades have passed, but she has a hard time accepting that this guy hit her daughter and she couldn't stop him. I mentioned the incident once when she first came to see me. It was a whole night of crying, shaking, and apologizing. Obviously, this is not something I want to experience again, so I didn't mention it again, and I don't want to do it again. Some people may think I'm crazy for getting into this again after so many years, but at this point in our lives, there is only love and respect. What happened many years ago remains in the past. Now, when I see my wife, and I must admit to myself that I have always considered her my wife, I feel only love and affection. I think things will only get better, and hopefully we have good years ahead as we enter old age. She did make some bad choices many years ago, but that's in the past. I think we've both faced the consequences, but now I'm looking forward to life and moving forward. This may sound sentimental, but one thing is important to me. I always thought we were writing a book together, but I was sad that we might never get the chance to finish it. I'm glad we now have another chance to finish writing this book and include the final chapters. Will my wife cheat again? I don't think she'll do it at this point in our lives. But age and experience have shown me that all people are a mixture of good and bad. There is good and bad in each of us, and one action or decision does not define a person. I also have regrets. My regret is that I always loved my wife and allowed sad feelings to dictate my decisions. Maybe I just had to accept that she was human and made a bad choice. Perhaps I should have given this a chance sooner and things could have been better. I think about the what-ifs, too. But I'm glad we have this second chance. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.